So my name's Ben Pink-Dandelin. I'm part of the Learning and Research team at Woodbrook. And I'd like to welcome you to the second of three Eva Koch presentations that we have from our group of scholars in 2025. The Eva Koch Scholarship was set up probably about 25 years ago now by Hugh Lawson, who is married to Eva Koch, and he set up this scholarship in her memory for a short period of research that's of benefit to friends. And this used to be held in person at the Woodbrook Centre, and obviously in recent years it's moved online. And so the scholars we've been will listen to, have had 12 weeks basically working with tutor support to really begin a process of research that I think in each of the cases will carry on beyond the presentations this evening. So tonight we have friends from Golders Green Meeting who are going to be talking about how a meeting house can be a hub for Quaker witness. And this is the first time actually that we've given the scholarship to a group. So this is a departure for us, and it's been also part of a learning experience, I think. And it's been a great joy and privilege to work with the friends from Golders Green. So we're going to begin with a short video that has been made by the meeting.
Welcome to our meeting house in London, NW11, UK. London is a busy capital city with lots of traffic. Our meeting house was built in 1913 in the Hampstead Gardens suburb, a vision of Dame Henrietta Barnett to provide a community embracing diverse people housed in well-planned homes, set in woodland and open spaces. It is a beautiful, simple styled building designed by the Quaker architect Fred Rowntree. For over 120 years, it has absorbed the centred meeting for worship of many friends, such as Joan Mary Fry, who assisted on the restoration of heavily bombed Dresden after World War II, Gerald Priestland, the BBC Religious Affairs correspondent, and Sydney and Brenda Bailey, who worked for peace in the United Nations in the USA. Visitors comment on its calm, peaceful atmosphere. The front garden is part of an ancient woodland, as is Big Wood at the rear of the building. These woods host a wonderful array of native trees, plants, and creatures. It is a sanctuary for those who seek a quiet place to be still and to draw close to nature. Friends in this meeting have been challenged to consider our future, how we can maintain this beautiful building and the special garden environment. We want to become a centre of Quaker witness for the natural environment at this time of climate change. We are inspired to support those who respond constructively to climate challenges and to offer nurture to those seeking climate justice for all.
Everybody, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Julia Mann and I'm going to be presenting the first section of our combined project. Introduction and overview. My input to this project should be seen in the context of my role as an elder at Golders Green Meeting House in northwest London. I used this scholarship as an opportunity to gauge the spiritual life and activity of our meeting. I looked at ways to
Julia, you may need to turn your video off.
And local.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Can everybody still, is it that better? Right, okay. Okay, you've all had a good look at me, now it's fine. I'll just talk. Should I start again?
Yes, okay.
Okay. So my input to this project should be seen in the context of my role as an elder at Golders Green Meeting House in northwest London. This scholarship is an opportunity to gauge the spiritual life and activity of our meeting. I looked at ways to deepen the spiritual life of our Quaker and local faith communities. A broader aim was to see how strong the spiritual base of the meeting is for it to expand into a possible new role as a hub for local Quakers at area meeting level, the whole of London and beyond. Backdrop to all this was a research, climate justice, which then informed my activities. Another aim, therefore, was to increase an awareness of climate justice and the environment at our local meeting, and to use this theme as a focus over the scholarship period. I explored how the focus on climate justice could enhance and strengthen the spiritual life of the meeting and related activities held at the meeting house, such as our Saturday interfaith outreach was also part of my contribution. My feedback and results will hopefully be of help to other elders and friends. So what then were my actions and the process? How did I go about this? On the 24th of November 2024, we held a meeting to discuss the future of the meeting house. With 11 people present, this constitutes, that in case you weren't aware, we are quite a small meeting house. Jean emphasized the keystone for our discussion should be guided by the promptings of love and truth in our hearts regarding the future of our spiritual journey together. And she asked the group this question: what is the future of this meeting house for us here, now, and moving forwards? Also, what is it that makes a difference? What is unique, particular, and God-given to us in this place? And after very lively discussion and very positive feedback about the special quality of our meeting house and its surroundings and what it meant to members, the following quote read by a member truly inspired us. I'm quoting from Terry Waite from his book, Taken Trust. From his book, Taken Trust. My belief is that the church, more than ever, needs to concentrate on depth of religious experience. Our fragmented society needs a whole series of reflective pools, places where the very deepest issues of life and death may be explored and understood away from the cut and thrust of the marketplace. And this really kind of some inspiration. Jean concluded by saying, we are looking to the future not only because the London Property Trust is asking this question, but because it is time to review what we need to say, agree on, and listen to together, to find a preface to how we implement what we are led to do in our vision going forward. She further stated that we have a place here in Hampstead Garden suburb and in a like to share some exciting areas of ministry that this meeting could do. This also tied in well with views expressed on how we need to rise to the challenge of moving into a new time ahead. And so it was just so fantastic that we then received the Eva Koch Scholarship a few months after this meeting had taken place. And this enabled us to follow through what we actually had initiated at this meeting, feeling confident we had the solid support So in our Saturday silent retreat days, we did guided meditation walks in Big Wood. You saw the beautiful pictures of it in our opening video there. The woodland that borders the meeting house premises. I also introduced an environmental poem as a possible focus for the day. And my fellow scholarship partner, Jean Jen, introduced an experiment with light exercise to start the retreat day with an adapted environmental focus. We'd gather after the silence and we'd have a bit of feedback how the day went. And in fact, one person was truly grateful and found the poem, really wonderful. I then helped organize and facilitate guest speakers for our fourth Sunday discussion groups, which occur after meeting for worship and a shared lunch. So as we were saying, we had this time period of 3 months, and over that we had 4 Sundays. So that meant 4 discussions, and we focused. The first one included a PowerPoint presentation by Letta Jones on Quaker botanists linked to the Quaker Tapestry panel. Mike Jim then led a discussion on our personal response to the challenges of climate change and practical ways forward. John Scheinborn and I spoke about spiritual accompaniment and support. Our topics included threshing and clearness meetings, spiritual accompaniment, and this was a fruitful discussion as around half of the group of approximately 12 people were not aware of Experiment with Light. One person's feedback was, "I have learned more in this hour than ever before." The final discussion included the Eco Church Lifestyle Survey being made available to members to guide personal choices, together with a nature painting poem meditation composed by my late husband and I, Sense of Wonder. And in fact, I've actually uploaded it onto our Golders Green website under the Eva Koch page at the top, if you'd like to refer to this poem in due course in your own time. So the discussion on the sense of wonder resulted in wonderful personal reflections. So through using the arts, and in particular poetry, that had an environmental theme, I placed uplifting poems as a gentle prompt on the meeting house external notice boards, encouraging members to engage with them. Poem was also read out aloud after meeting for worship. I created questions to help discern the spiritual needs of individuals and of the meeting in general, and then noted the answers. Generally, the consensus of people was that they were happy how things were, but some hoped for more enrichment through Experiment with Light being reintroduced. Interestingly, we did have introduced at our meeting, as well as wishes for a Bible study group. I presented a prayer bead workshop over 2 Thursday evenings during Lent at St. Jude's in March. St. Jude's is the Anglican church in the same Hampstead Garden Suburb Square as our meeting house. This was part of my community outreach and interfaith work. One person from our meeting joined the course, and feedback from attendees was positive, and they were delighted contemplative prayer and how to make their own set of prayer beads. Furthermore, I continue to facilitate a Christian meditation group at St. Jude's on Tuesday evenings, and also one member of our meeting joined us for that. Behind the scenes, I helped with some technical IT aspects required for our scholarship work. For example, I created, I've just mentioned to you, which is solely the one page is dedicated to the scholarship. I also worked on our initial photographs and wording for our project proposal. I took notes at our meetings and made them available to other scholarship members, as well as collated all our information and photographs. And now for my conclusion. It was good to have a concentrated period within which to work and to have one particular focus, in this case, climate justice. Everything could be achieved in such a short time frame of 3 months. This helped us to understand much of what we were doing could be seen as a catalyst to exciting possibilities in the future. The hope is that by giving people an open and safe place to bring their concerns, a place to think about their spiritual journeys and the environment and the connection between the two, we have deepened our members' spiritual lives. Ongoing work will include and reintroducing experiment with light. It is a further hope that themes on the environment will continue in the future based on the work we have done, and in my case, by providing nature poems and meditations. Then a note about moving forward. Going back to the original, one of the questions posed by our scholarship title, does the meeting have a strong spiritual base to allow for expansion as a hub for climate justice and for environmental focused events? Then I feel my answer is yes, in that there is a very strong, dedicated group of people at present who are spiritually grounded and committed. My one concern is because it is a small meeting, resources and people are stretched, and work will be needed to encourage new members and younger ones to take all this good work done in the scholarship forward and to keep it sustainable. To finish on a very nice positive note, it should be noticed we've had a recent influx of new attendees, which looks most promising. And finally, I would like to read Advices and Queries from Quaker Faith and Practice 1.0242. We do not own the world, and its riches are not ours to dispose of at. Show a loving consideration for all creatures and seek to maintain the beauty and variety of the world. Work to ensure that our increasing power over nature is used responsibly with reverence for life. And we've read this out as we feel this has been a guiding principle that has inspired us and will continue to inspire our work on climate justice at Golders Green Meeting House. To hand over to Jean to show some of the inspiration that we received from this quote and just each other and all the spiritual support from our group. So hopefully now Jean and Alex and John are going to share further some of the wonderful good work that has been done at Golders Green Meeting House. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Hello, everyone. Well, what a journey it's been. And in the process, two words have become very important to us. What is our discernment? What is our ministry in developing our way forward as a meeting? Those two words are stewardship and sanctuary. Stewardship because the process of discernment made it became very clear that we should make a commitment to the woodland environment that we see as gifted to us, as so too is our Grade 2 listed meeting house. We must care for this woodland in a way that must note and protect it from the worst effects of climate change, but also from human impact. So many green spaces in London are badly impacted by human footfall. And I have to say, sorry, dog owners, by so many dogs running about. We are trying to keep our woodland as pristine and as true to itself as we can allow. We also want to become a hub for those who promote the place as climate justice as a focus of our ways forward. Sanctuary, Well, we've looked for ways to protect and promote the biodiversity of our woodland environment, more of that in a minute, and to offer this place for others, for their nurture and for their support. So the first thing we did, we looked about and we found Bob Gilbert, a qualified naturalist, author and broadcaster, and we invited him to come and look at our woodland. And one day in springtime, he came and identified over 40 native species of trees and plants. There he is at work. Over 40 in our small little woodland garden. He was very impressed, and so were we. So he's going to come back in the summer and again in the autumn, and we will then have a full seasonal record of all the plants in our woodland. Some creatures that inhabit our woodland we know are hedgehogs. We know because our neighbour has seen them coming out in the late dusk. So we decided to build a hedgehog corridor along the side of the building of our meeting house. We have planted 50 mixed native hedge whips. Whips are little tiny saplings about a foot tall. And we now link big wood to the rear to our front woodland garden at the front. To do so, we held an open gardening party. Everyone was invited to come along, and 9 brave friends did so. Now, the video we were given by the I Dig Trees charity that provided these hedge whips for free said, oh, you just put your spade in, give it a little wiggle, put the whip in, tap it down, all done. But what we didn't realise is that underneath the stones at the side of our path where we were planting this hedge, we wanted to keep the stones to retain the moisture. But below the stones, there was a thick tarpaulin. Underneath the tarpaulin, there was dry, stony, compacted soil. But, with some grumbling, but undeterred, we set to, and as you can see, a little trough was dug and built, and we beavered away, and soon, well, not soon, a few hours later, all the whips were planted. And when the work was done, we enjoyed a well-deserved tea and cake. Good Quaker tradition. There's a local group that's called Friends of Bigwood. And we've decided to become members of Friends of Bigwood, so we link with their expertise. We receive their email newsletter, and they in turn will invite us to take part in future surveys, for example, of bats, which is planned. One of the first activities that we were invited to was a morning birdsong walk. And we really enjoyed it. This was led by David Darrell Lambert, a renowned ornithologist and director of Bird Brain Britain, UK. We learned, amongst many other things, that there is much less birdsong in the woodland in springtime because the birds are busy nesting. And woe betide the male birds who continue to sing out to announce their territory when their poor hen is sitting on the nest trying to look after these very hungry chicks. So he said that's why they go quiet, because they're too busy feeding their hungry broods. That is why David said they need bird feeders. And we thought, there's so much food around here. Listen, when you're working that hard, collecting 100 caterpillars a day, give them a little help. So we now have a squirrel-proof bird feeder in our woodland garden. A few years ago, a large bough fell from one of our oak trees. Some of it was cut into small logs, some into larger logs, and they were placed on our green mossy grass area as seats, part of our fairy ring. But much was left just on the ground to create a habitat for many beasts, hedgehogs, and squirrels. In fact, so much so that the little house for the squirrel became a mansion, and then it became a castle. But all was well used. We've invited Nigel Brock, a well-known local urban garden wildlife expert, to survey what other small creatures we have in our garden and how we might better manage the area for their well-being. Last Sunday, we hosted a guided walk with Bob Gilbert on Tales from Trees, an exploration, he said, of local native trees, the stories we've woven around them, and their folklore and their uses. It was wonderful. Well over 20 friends from the local neighbourhood and from neighbouring Quaker meetings came, and we were entertained for an hour and a half with these amazing facts of information and stories. And here we are. We could spend the rest of our time telling you all the good stories we heard, but we won't. Sufficient to say that Bob is not chastising someone there with a birch whip. He was explaining how the birch twigs were bound together and they were used as, first of all, a broom to sweep out the dirt, but because the birch was supposed to have evil spirit removing properties. So if you swept out your medieval home, you rid it of dirt and of evil spirits. And of course, any child that needed chastisement got not only a birch whip on the hand, but it got rid of the evil spirits that caused them to be such a naughty person in the first place. You can see how wonderfully well we were entertained. But we wanted to share with you that it hasn't always been joyful. We had some very sad news. You might recall seeing in our video at the beginning a magnificent oak tree at the front of our property. It's a 200-plus-year-old oak tree, and we had a survey done, and it revealed that it has a deep fungal infection in the trunk of the tree. This will affect its stability. We were shocked, we were upset, we were determined to try and find out anything we could do to try and save this tree, and we continued to do so. But it is close to a road, and we have to exercise care and mindful of the risks of if this tree should fall in high winds or extreme weather conditions. So whilst fighting to save it, we're also obliged to plan for its removal. We arranged that if it has to be done, it's going to be done in winter time with least impact on the environment around it. And we're going to, already, we've got ideas of how we're going to give events of celebration and thanksgiving for this wonderful tree. But when I went out to look at that tree, I noticed nearby a little sturdy oak sapling. And I thought, maybe this is a message we need to hear. Here is the potential future. Here is hope. And talking of potential future, we really want to engage more of our young children and young people in this work that we're doing. And we have activities planned to invite local families to enjoy our woodland activities. And in September, we're hosting a London-wide gathering of Quaker families. And they're going to come to our meeting for worship in the morning, share lunch with us, and then engage in the afternoon with climate activities, climate justice activities, and woodland environment activities. So we're looking forward to that. So you can see we are exercising our stewardship as energetically as time and energy allows. But we're also very mindful that what the other side of this coin is to protect the peace, quiet, and this extraordinary place. We see people passing by, looking down that long path towards our building, as you might recall from seeing the video. And we put a notice at the front of our meeting house. Come and sit a while in this quiet place. So many plans ahead. I'm going to go through them very quickly because I'm mindful, as always, I'm over time. But we will want to write up, present, share all the knowledge that we're gaining. We're going to have more woodland activities in the autumn, a wood sculpture exhibition, storytelling for adults and for children, inviting teenage woodcraft folks, extending our Saturday retreat days to a midweek day, and encouraging more and more people to use our meeting house for all activities that might add to their sense of well-being, their mindfulness, and their care of our special place. That's what we're doing. But we're also looking ahead. We're continuing to reach out to others. Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Jean, and good evening, friends. I'll just get up the presentation if I can, hopefully. Share. So is that visible to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
I hope you can see the actual slide, and rather than the notes down below. I'm not sure if the notes are coming up for you to see as well. But I've been asked to say a little bit about how I got involved, because I'm an attendee at Golders Green, because I've always admired the Quakers' value system, and I love the lack of flummery, I suppose one might call it, and the silence. So that's how I started to get involved. And then I live very locally, and not all our meeting members do live within the Hampstead Garden suburb. So, and I, as a now retired landscape architect, I got involved with a subgroup of the Residents Association, which is hugely active. And they have a trees and open spaces group, which I have been convening the meetings of recently and enticed them to meet at the Quaker Meeting House. They did used to meet originally in somebody's house, but that's no longer possible. So hopefully we will entice more green groups to come and use it as a hub. So I'm just going to quickly say what we did under the headings of awareness and learning. So we started off as a result of letters, knowledge and of Rookhow in the north. And we had an online meeting with their development worker, which was very interesting because it was also about reinventing the meaning and use of that meeting house, which is in a much more rural setting, but woodland too. Very different from ours in that we have different inhibitions as to how we can use our properties. And ours being a more urban meeting house and actually belonging to the trust that oversees the whole of the suburb, we can't do what we want with it. So the Rookhow building had ancillary buildings which they could turn into more or less like a little youth hostel and have people camping and staying overnight. Now, that's not something we're able to do, but we are fairly well connected to public transport, and the bus comes from the station, the tube station, to the corner past our meeting house. So it's not difficult to get to. So that's how we started looking at what other people were doing. We were, in terms of awareness and learning, looking at adding new material to the library, and I'm sort of notionally the librarian. And so you can see some of our new acquisitions here. So I've got more to do on thinking about how to encourage people to read those and share what they've learnt from them. And maybe we can set up a kind of reading group to do that. Jean's mentioned the surveys and the Tales from the Trees, which was fascinating. And Julia's mentioned the shared Sunday lunches and what we did in terms of discussing simple and sustainable living personally and as families and individuals. And the topics were around home and food, clothing and travel. And some people contributed their experience of new products that were much better than the ones that once traditionally been used. And we asked other people to suggest things and discuss and pass on hints and tips for that. We also carried out an adaptation of the eco survey and came up with some very small changes we could make and some rather larger ones that we needed to investigate. We don't know actually what's in our roof insulation, if there is anything at all. And so that's a biggie to perhaps look into and certainly deal with. And then there were smaller things like, could we put up with lower room temperatures in meetings and so on. And then in terms of action and change, again, Jean has mentioned most of this, and I'll just go through it. I won't repeat what she suggested. But mostly my role was really to look at increasing the profile of our building and making local links, which I'll go on to in a bit more detail. Also, it was suggested that we have an article in the quarterly Suburb News, which is a very professionally presented magazine, I suppose one could call it, rather than a newspaper. And so hopefully that'll make people more aware, because our meeting house is small and simple and tucked away off the road. So I think a lot of people don't actually know it exists, even though, as Jean said, we put out a board to say you're welcome to come in when we're meeting. Recently, I met somebody who grew up in the suburb and actually didn't even know the meeting house existed at all. And it is hugely dominated, obviously, by the two Lutchins churches. So excuse the next two slides, which are scribbled, and I'm afraid I haven't managed to convert them into something elegant looking. But the idea was just thinking about, here we are as the hub, and what spokes can we attach to it and encourage to look at it. So it's starting from the meeting house and what we're surrounded by. So on one side, we have the big wood, which obviously our garden was once part of. And then towards the front, so we've got the sort of rural at the back, and at the front, we look onto Central Square with these wonderful, huge churches, which share some commonality in terms of shrinking congregations and increasing expenses of maintaining these amazing buildings. So that's the sort of that's our immediate context. And then looking a bit further out, as an outer London borough in the borough of Barnet, we have a sort of hinterland of quite a rural borough that goes out to the green belt. But within that borough, we have other organisations. The suburb is managed, as I mentioned before, by a trust who tries to maintain the principles and the look of the place as a very green environment. But we also have on the edge the extension to Hampstead Heath, and that is managed by the City of London, which is obviously not necessarily local, but has other very large pieces of woodland and a huge amount of knowledge. So Epping Forest and other places in South London. So they have a lot on their plate, but have been very useful. So we have a sort of layer of three major organisations that we need to liaise with because we are within a conservation area. So any work we want to do to trees, we have to get consent for. And Jean's mentioned the sad potential demise of our biggest oak tree. So that will need consent. So I've got about as far as sort of getting into the borough wider picture. And I did that really by trying to list all the organisations that had a relevance. And there's been for quite a while now a Friends of Parks movement, because parks periodically go through, and probably are going through it again now, of local authorities not having sufficient funds to manage them properly. And so groups of friends got together to campaign and to sometimes take over and manage the park or areas of the park themselves. So the useful network in Barnet is that they have drawn together these groups and they meet quarterly. So in order to reach out to more and let them know what we were doing, I went to one of their meetings last, I think it was in April, and told them about, I was there under the aegis of the Garden Suburbs Trees and Open Spaces group, but also to tell them about what the Quaker Meeting House was doing. So out of that has come the notion that we might do more further outreach. And it's endless once one starts thinking about it, because there are other different groups, not just green groups, but obviously climate justice groups. And one of the things to do next is to explore whether some of the national organisations that are relevant, like Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth and XR, Extinction Rebellion, and so on, have local groups that we could offer to host, because certainly in the suburb, there's actually not that many meeting places. There's Fellowship House, which was bombed in the war and rebuilt as a rather less interesting building in the 50s, and a couple of church halls. So there's more to be done in terms of reaching out to people who have sympathetic interests as we do. And beyond that, I thought that what we could do is try and draw people together, because the network of friends groups is one thing, but it excludes a lot of other people who have an interest, from allotments and city farms, nature reserves, meanwhile uses of spaces that are waiting development or just been forgotten and neglected. And then, of course, there's refugee projects.
Alex, I wonder if you could finish by talking just briefly about the Big Green Barn at Fair.
That's what I'm sort of doing now, Jean, so I'm coming to an end, you'll be glad to know.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of, it's really about linking people and place, because together we're stronger. And if we can avoid people duplicating resources or information or sharing information, that would be worthwhile doing. So I've put out an idea for that, and we'll see whether it's welcomed or not. But we probably won't do a big bang thing, but we could start small and hopefully grow it and use our premises as a base for that. So I'll stop there, if I may. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex. So I think we now pass to John.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Alex. So I, I think we ought to say that Golders Green local meeting is one of 5 meetings that constitute Northwest London area meeting, all in different parts of really Camden, Barnet, the centre of London at Friends House, and in Finchley. So what I was asked to do, or what I wanted to do, unfortunately was asked to do it, was look at the climate justice actions individuals actually took and the different kinds of spiritual support they identified as receiving. I thought that some inferences could be made from what was said about Quaker spiritual support, and then I hope to identify what could Golders Green meeting offer to those concerned with climate justice, but really not just climate justice, others seeking to put their faith into practice, because the same kind of spiritual support is going to be useful for climate justice activists or witnesses, as well as other people who are moved to act to make this a better world. So the presentation that's coming up is in 4 parts. The first describes relevant characteristics of the interviewees and the interview, of course, maintaining their anonymity. Identify ways of witnessing to climate justice via the Quaker way. Identifies and discusses different forms of spiritual support interviewees drew upon to support their witness. And finally, there's some concluding observations about spiritual support for faith in practice, or for putting faith into practice. So, in the time I had available, I managed to interview 5 people, 2 in person, 3 on Zoom. 4 were attenders at Quaker meetings, just 1 was a full member of the society. 2 came forward as a result of a broadcast invitation, and 3 were acquaintances I asked, knowing of their involvement. It turned out to be a very useful sample. Yes, 5, but very rich interviews. Basically of about 2, not basically, between 1 and 2 hours, and there were follow-up sessions as well. Basically, the interviews comprised a culturally diverse group in relation to class and ethnicity. 2 declared their minority backgrounds in relation to British Quakers. 1 said they thought Quakers were not really like me. 3 interviewees were in paid work, 2 of whom were raising young children. The 2 others were retirees. 1 had worked in an organization related to climate justice. I tried, but was unable to connect with the young adult Quakers group, which is 18 to 35. So, how do people get involved in witnessing to climate justice? I mean, the interesting thing is that it's all age groups seem to get involved. 2 started in primary school, 1 of whom wrote letters to Margaret Thatcher and mobilized their classmates. I think that is fantastic. Another became passionate about protecting Earth and nature since primary school, and has been active basically since that time. 1 started in secondary school, the 3rd, joined a climate justice club. They became involved with Earth Day celebrations and went to events with their mother and mother's committed friend. And that had a very big impact on her, positive. 1 started at university. They went as a student of economics and social science to quite a radical college, and they became aware of the impact of industrial activities on the world. They joined the Green Party, even though it's very small, but it seemed important. Food poverty was the emphasis at that time against the background of the famines in Africa. The 5th person actually joined Extinction Rebellion and got a serious engagement with them. This particular person had gone to a Quaker school, but at that school, he was definitely an atheist, and he came from an atheist working class background, and made the best of it. And it clearly had a big impact on him. What immediately appealed about Extinction Rebellion was because it wasn't like the other environmental charities or NGOs. They've all got their stake in power, he thought. The climate crisis is such an all-encompassing crisis that it needs somebody from outside who isn't compromised by their involvement with normal establishment compromises. Subsequently, there's all sorts of involvement in promoting climate justice. For example, giving talks to groups, running stalls at fairs, promoting sustainable food growing, composting, and helping people reconnect with Mother Earth. Working for community recycling on a working class estate. There was much interest which confounded middle class expectations. Another worked on an ecotourist project. Someone had an internship with a global environmental organization. And two or three of the interviewees had associations with Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth as youngsters. Engaging with the WhatsApp group, Quaker support for climate justice was also very important for one person in particular. It's very involved with that. There was, of course, protests and marches that people went on, two of whom were actually arrested. Supporting people who take part in protest individually and through involvement in the organization Green and Black Cross, and also informally, just because they know these people need support. Reducing carbon on a personal level, people were trying to reduce their carbon footprint, having discussions with the family, which is not always easy, about becoming vegetarian, becoming aware of the injustice to animals. The less problematic was sorting out house insulation and solar heating, avoiding flying, and even refusing smartphones. Finally, some people knocked on doors asking people whether they had concerns about the environment. We had proper conversations with people who had never talked about this stuff before and were really interested. And this was round about election time, but it wasn't a party political interview or discussion. I think two things really ought to be emphasized, though, which I just not clear how well supported they are by Friends. Firstly is the Living Witness Project and their meetings for worship, because one of the interviewees was very involved with that. These happen twice a week, early morning. Living Witness welcomes friends who are actively discerning how we might respond to the unfolding climate and ecological crises. Central to this is nurturing a deepening spiritual exploration among Quakers and others, and supporting each other in the action and witness that may grow from this. This is easily available on the inline online. Just Google it. The second project is the Loving Earth Project, which is concerned with producing and displaying art with textiles rather than paints, which are more expensive, and textiles are varied and are ready-made, online and at public exhibitions. And this is run now by the Quaker Arts Network. They've offered workshops and given workshops in schools. The local primary school had great responses. There's lots can be done in outreach here. The children, it was observed, when they first got involved with this, didn't apparently have too much sense of agency, but they were excited and they all found something they could do, e.g. not going to eat meat, presumably nagging parents, going to talk to their mum about not buying corned beef because it's high in saturated fat and unhealthy, and about palm oil. Some did say they would write to their MPs. This is really interesting stuff because kids do have agency if they can discover it. Workshops at the local library were also offered, and they were concerned with what's happened in the world environmentally. In addition, this Loving Earth project is involved and was involved with training people to run workshops. Then COVID happened, but they just moved online, and that also worked well. An interesting statement. All of these things are about holding spaces for the spirit, but I wouldn't call it that. It's about what love and truth are asking of you. So support from the Quaker way. I'm going to talk about what each of the interviewees actually said, and I'm quoting with some of the editing from them. After years away from friends, I just felt I had to go to a Quaker meeting. That was my first, what I would call like a religious experience. And this was someone who actually had been at a Quaker school, had a scholarship there. Deeply moved by the unexpected ministry to do with climate justice. It's kind of a dissident worldview and worth remaining dissident. Quaker testimonies woke me up to the gravity of climate injustice. The fact that people on the front lines are already dying, already suffering massively. When he was arrested, they took Quaker faith and practice into the holding cell. Something is happening, perhaps moving away from complete atheism to something else here. Anyway, the Quaker business method also was very important, and that person wished it had been instituted within XR. It's a spiritual practice where you put your own needs and your own ego aside. It's not an intellectual thing. It's like absorbing a collective mind almost. The person of God didn't exist for this person, although I've never had antipathy towards Christianity and like the figure of Christ. I so appreciate going to meeting because I could speak about things that mattered to me. People might disagree with me. That doesn't matter. We can have a conversation. I'm heard, and we're actually addressing important topics. The second person emphasized leadings, little nudges, Quaker Quest when it was operational, and the diversity of beliefs among Quakers. In fact, they said that when they first went to their first meeting for worship, it felt like coming home. It's an old cliche, but it happens to many of us. When we go there for the first time, it's an amazing experience. There is an active group at that person's local meeting. There's Sunday discussions, deeper spiritual conversations. Found the open air Quaker meeting at Marble Arch incredible. I think that's probably the most special, most powerful that I've ever been to. That person also got financial support from pastoral friends to go to yearly meeting, and terrific personal support from a member of the Quaker Environment Group when going on trial. I feel the Spirit most strongly when I'm outside in the environment. I don't really need to be in a community of humans for that, because I'm in a community of everything there. Next person basically talked about the deep friendships with individuals drawn on for individual support. They make a lot of use of the WhatsApp Quaker support for climate justice. But that person also associated with and associates with a Buddhist meditation group and with the White Eagle Lodge, which is sympathetic to the view that our soul follows a path over many lifetimes on its journey to enlightenment. The person is also a student of a course in miracles since 2004, attends long online talks and local study groups, but also noticed that local meetings are very, very different. Some, like her own, are not so interested in climate justice. Others she's been to clearly are. The one member spoke about appreciating the discipline of Quaker worship and Quaker worship for business, the same as the person who was involved with the Extinction Rebellion. But the worship for business, for nurturing that Holy Spirit, seeing how the Spirit was leading, waiting to see what emerged, and then testing that. And you can test that in a group. You can't really test that just by yourself. That person also had done equipping for ministry, as I actually have done, and that was a turning point in my life, and it seems to have been a turning point in their life as well. Although I joined Friends back in 1966. But equipping for ministry has been a very powerful influence on many people. All the people I know who my peers who did equipping for ministry were very much affected by it. And it's just recently been reinstituted after a pause. Anyway, meeting with specific tutors and peers was very important, one of whose climate witness was strong. And discussion groups of various kinds are very valuable. But in particular, a tutor there was perhaps the first experience of being spiritually accompanied, although it wasn't a formal contract for spiritual accompaniment. But that's where spiritual accompaniment then became also a very important part of that person's life. The last person I want to mention really appreciated starting a meeting in silence, and that had been experienced also in Quaker Business Method and also on Quaker courses. Stillness and silence was not really part of our work culture or culture at all. At work, that was amazing for meetings. I think she facilitates these meetings now and encourages people to just tune in with themselves. Like the Quaker Business Method is a method to use in secular organizations. And then that person came across holocracy, which is in an American organization. It felt very Quakerly. What it does is ensures that tensions in a group are attended to. It's part of the process. It's a regular agenda item. One of our principles, community principles, is that we address tensions with curiosity. And that really helps. We use that reminder every meeting and keeping the, as far as possible, ego out of it. But when I feel lost, this person said, I go back to Christ. That's where my foundation is. I pray. My prayer has changed. It's almost all gratitude now. And getting out of the polarities of them and us and obvious conflicts. I think that has kind of guided me into becoming more accepting of the fact that there are differences. They don't necessarily need to lead into terrible conflict. In fact, that person reminded me of something. I don't know if you've read any of Etty Hillesum's work, who died during the Holocaust, but she found a spiritual life as death was approaching. And she found there was no point in hating enemies. It was much more about listening to God and being open and receptive to God's love, which she discovered in that dire situation. I want to say something about formal spiritual accompaniment, because that was offered on the 5-year Woodbrook program called the Climate Crisis, Spiritual Nurture and Learning Project, which ceases this August. It hasn't been able to get more funding to continue. I was told there were many introductory sessions on the practice of spiritual accompaniment with a good uptake for these, but only 1 or 2 people explored asking for an accompaniment after them, which was less than expected. For one interviewee, what a careers coach offered when she was quite young seemed like spiritual accompaniment now, in response to the interviewees searching specifically for a way to embody their deepest needs in relation to their choice of work. They were employed in a place where they were unhappy. It was quite a prestigious institution, but it just didn't speak to her. And she spent 4 months with this careers coach, which really sounds like a spiritual accompaniment. She grew up in a traditional Black church, and when she was growing up, there was a social and racial justice were very much intertwined with religious life. The pursuance of social justice was never separate from spirituality for this person. Now has managed to integrate their faith and practice in the work that they're doing. Another interviewee said their tutor on equipping for ministry, I've sort of said this already, I'm sorry, but was the first conscious experience of being accompanied spiritually. They had personal Quaker friends with whom they had had long regular conversations, and two with elderly friends, which were really precious. But there is a difference between informal and formal work in spiritual accompaniment. Longer term, formal spiritual accompaniment had given me such a lot. You don't always have those conversations when you need them, but there are people who are wanting to have those conversations. But I suppose, this person said, the whole thing about having accompaniment has helped me to be true to the leadings that I'm getting. That's really helpful. Most elders just don't have the time or the skills or the inclination to spend a lot of time listening and accompanying. Another interview described what is in effect a form of group spiritual accompaniment arising from their own local meeting. 8 of us. We wondered whether that would be slightly too many, but it's actually, I think, worked out really perfectly. We meet once a month with a focus person. The convener changes each time as well. It's in a worship sharing kind of format. And in fact, it seems to follow a fairly well-known form of group spiritual accompaniment. There's a book by Alice Freiling called Seeking God Together, which is an introduction to group spiritual accompaniment. I think I need to,
Yeah.
How am I for time?
We need to press on a little bit, John.
Right,
So
I'm going to concluding observations.
Yes, okay, quickly,
yeah.
Thanks.
I need to, here we go. Let's have a look. I'm going to share my screen for this. Firstly, as a result of these interviews and looking at them, the local meeting is not always the place where a person's spirituality is nourished, nor climate justice witness supported. Secondly, spiritual accompaniment is often received informally with special friends, more like soul friendship, which is a name that has been used for spiritual accompaniment. John O'Donoghue talks about soul friendship in his book Alankara, the Book of Celtic Wisdom. Third, an evaluation of the Woodbrook climate justice witnesses' experience of being spiritually accompanied would show what was really appreciated by that, but also perhaps what was difficult. One interview said how helpful formal one-to-one accompaniment was for them. Another reported on how useful they found what was in practice group spiritual accompaniment. A third is about to start one-to-one accompaniment. The point is, spiritual conversations are valued, but they need to be set up in a particular way. They can't simply be ordinary conversations. It's like when you have silence before and silence after meetings. Interviewees have a strong desire to integrate their faith and practice. This is what I really think about the situation within the society. I think opportunities for spiritual conversation in the form of experiment with light, meetings for clearness, threshing meetings, Bible study, and individual and group spiritual accompaniment should be offered to all associated with a local meeting. Probably the provision should be coordinated and overseen by the area meeting. Provision can be implemented at a local meeting and on Zoom. And why I think this is so important is that I think especially newcomers who find their way to a meeting, a local meeting for worship, are looking for something which probably needs to be sometimes more personal than what a meeting for worship by itself can offer. I think they're looking for conversation, and they're looking for ways, in a sense, to make a difference to their own lives. So I'm a great advocate of both group and one-to-one spiritual accompaniment. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thanks, John. Can you stop the share now?
Yep. Stop share. Yeah.
Friends, just a few summary thoughts to conclude with. you will see that we have been very much faithfully responding to the discernments that we have found in the last year. And to this we have added witness, stewardship, sanctuary, and witness. But we do emphasize that we are at the beginning of this journey. We started off with no expertise, special knowledge, engagement with climate justice issues, but we are learning. We are in a much longer process, and we are valuing being that. It's part of our spiritual journey. We just want to affirm that this witness has come about because we had to learn. We didn't know. With that learning became an awareness, and that awareness touched our hearts, and it brought about an understanding that demanded change individually and together as a group. And that change called for action and support for action. So we know we're only one small meeting, we're one small group. And just to say, we may only be 4 speakers, but we do have the body of the meeting very much engaged with us. But we do follow Rufus Jones' words. I pin my hopes to quiet processes and small circles in which vital and transforming events take place. So we've been motivated to take action because of this scholarship. Oh my goodness, it's been time demanding, yes, but we've so valued it. We value the tutor support. The other scholars' joint meetings have been amazingly useful, encouraging, and again, joining together on spiritual paths. So thank you for the scholarship to develop this. Rich learning experience, it will continue. We've learnt so much. We're willing to share this learning. So please, if you're passing by Golders Green meeting, do come in. You'd be most welcome. If you can't actually come, look at our website. We're going to get better at informing people. But most importantly all, dear friends, is to say, please uphold us in our journey of faith and action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean. Well, thank you all, Julia, Alex, Jean and John. We've had a lot of information. There's been like almost multiple projects going on side by side. This is the richness of having a group undertake Eva Koch Scholarship. So thank you, everyone, friends. Thank you very much again to our presenters and the encouragement I think you've given us all to go into our meetings and try and do more. And maybe we could just close with a moment or two of worship. Thank you.